Eternal glances of a temporal life. Welcome to tonight's episode, dear listener. The idea is that we want to dive into the evolutionary landscape to wonder about what an experience of eternity could be like. Every human being, by looking at the nature of their world, will soon see the pattern that they exist in. And the biological body has a pattern of climbing the mountain and then climbing down that mountain. I find that in the 50% of life that one is climbing up this mountain, the mind is less, how do I say it? I feel like the human being lives as a body for half of its life, and the next half of its life, it lives as a mind. It's like when we climb down the mountain of physicality, we return to a mental state. And I find this unique, that if we treat the mind as a sort of field, then there could be various fields of mind influencing the being. When I was in Iran, when I was there at a young age before I immigrated to Canada, there was um, there was this constant kind of cultural etiquette where people would say, "My prayers with you, my prayers with you." You know, you're in my prayers, you're in my, you know. And I found it how interesting that human beings keep other human beings in their attention. And I thought about the mind of one being being present in the same field as the mind of another being. And I have constantly gone through this idea that we have been as a species trying to individually figure out a collective meaning, and we always fall short. Because the collective meaning is not per se a shape to resolve, a shaped resolution. In the evolutionary landscape, part of the landscape became alive, guys. The landscape evolved into self-awareness, into an awareness of a location separate from other locations. I consider the objective evolution to be the separation of a moving embodiment, a moving body upon it's as if like the creature first became physically separated, then the creature separated its physicality subjectively from itself. It's kind of like this. Imagine you see a house, right? When you look at a house, here, you see the human body, you see it has a skeleton. Okay, you see the human mind is awareness, and when you wonder about its skeleton, its structure, its foundation, I find personally, you arrive at a non-dual point of experience. A non-dual point of experience is a suggestion that the moment in its simplicity, there has no difference between the objects and subjects of experience than the experiencer. Right now, if I hold an object in my hand, that object is being considered separate from me, and it was separate from me, and I'm holding it. And sometimes when I look at the mind, it's as if it's like holding vision, and it's holding vision in certain shapes. But it's not holding with a hand, it's holding with the memory. The memory is like the limb of the mind, you know? You don't know where the car keys are, and your memory suddenly rides to help you. I don't know why I am so personally motivated and endlessly inspired to wonder about the unconscious factors of the human mind. I think it's because there is nowhere else left to go. In a cosmos where an experience exists for a little while, it wonders. It wonders with every breath how far the universe stretches in manifestation, how far the dimensions of the world open like petals of a lotus. You see, life is a natural phenomenon. What that means is it is listening to the voice of an unknown nature. When this becomes beautiful for you, I don't know how many people. There's a lot of people on this planet who will look at something that is known and it will be beautiful to them. But I don't know how many people will look at something that has an unknown beauty, an unexplainable position in the manifestation of the vision. Civilizations come and go. It is nothing new. When you access your memory through your presence, you will realize memories are letters of an alphabet. They are being chosen into position. They are being designed. It's as if another way of saying what the human being's life is, the meaning of life is a design. You are a designer behind your eyes. The designer behind your eyes is free. It is free because it works with the realms and the ability and the permissions of the subjective realm. Your subjective realm is not static. Your objective realm is more static than your subjective realm. This is why it's not a body, it's not a thought having a body, it's a body having thoughts. And so my biological existence is another way of saying it is my biological container. It's as if this is the thing that no human being can access supreme dualistic knowledge, by the way. What does that mean? That means I find that's too much of a celestial archetype for man's mind. At least in 2019. Of course, there will come a time where people will begin re-emerging as conscious points of their own, I believe, kind of cyberspace avatars. You see, it's kind of like, think about the evolution of social media becoming the first. It's like the person wants to show off their body, okay? You know, like for example, Instagram. So the being eventually would want to show their mind, but they would see. Think of it this way. This is guys, like, excuse the example, but I have to make this matter like example. We see Instagram models. They want to kind of reveal the kind of their naked body to some degree. On Instagram. Now we see that it's like reaching a point where people want to also reveal their naked mind. Now, that naked mind will at its core fundamentally be a design incomprehensible by others. This is why after some point, when I was younger, I felt judged by the world. When I got older, I realized I'm judging the world. I'm judging that the world is judging me, you know? And suddenly there is a freedom. There's certain moments of my life, there has been a freedom after chaos, and there has been a freedom after order. This year in 2019, guys, I will share it. It was one of the most intense experiences of my life. I won't tell the details to you, but I felt literally like as if this wind was hitting me, and all the archetypes of my moment were breaking. And for a second, I felt it's as if my breath was gonna leave. My breath was gonna leave with my body. I felt I'd stayed too long. And it was sorry guys, I'm getting a bit emotional, but it was an intense experience. And in that experience, I noticed something. I noticed the freedom that comes from pure chaos in which its aftermath is emptiness. There are moments in this life which will have no meaning other than in that instant. Really, I find the momentum. Like, you see, life, you got to have inspiration for it, or you don't feel you're going to move. So inspiration, just look at the word. It's kind of hilariously like in the spirit. Okay, as if what is moving the being is not per se just from a known landscape with known processed factors. There's many things in life that, regardless, even if you had the intelligence of an advanced machine, it's not just based on a machine. It has to do with the sensitivity of values on different dimensions. There was a movie, I, Robot, where Will Smith at the beginning, he's with this robot, like he's with this girl or something, and the car crashes, and the robot analyzes the percentage of if he can save Will Smith's character or that girl, and the percentage of saving Will Smith was more than the girl, so the robot saves Will Smith. Now, the reason Will Smith got upset was because Will Smith had access to an emotional dimension that many technological beings in the future will not have access. So an emotional dimension means the values of reality are kept different. For example, somebody could be the most powerful dictator, but imagine he goes home and his daughter's like, "Dad, I don't like you," and his young daughter. And the father, who's in some sense the most powerful man, everybody's forced to like him. The one person that matters doesn't like him, for example. It's the crumbling of power from an inner structure rather than an outer structure. Power is a shape, by the way. To be honest, in a temporary changing world, power is theatrics. People who are trying to, how can I tell you, there's no point um, being hostile in a world where hostility doesn't efficiently evolve it. There will come a moment in the life of every person who is alive where they will wonder truly what the meaning of manifest external expression is, what the point of this existential design is. And it is not just blindless continuity. It is not just us trying to pet the ape's head, pat our own backs as we continue. It is about the emergence of the most advanced intelligence known in this universal sector. You see, man is holding the torch, and man must pass on to the torch. That is the point of life. This life is not a personal game, ladies and gentlemen. It will eventually be seen as impersonal. The biggest regrets of the departing soul is that all the parts of life that it could have done something and it didn't. Since my childhood, I have known one experiences the cold, one experiences temperatures that are hot, one will experience moments and states of mind that are chaotic, one will experience moments and states of mind that are cold, that are ordered. And so man is oscillating, his intelligence is fighting for conscious control of the free will of the inanimate, and in some sense a conscious comprehension of the inanimate. What that means is man is a candle in a dark room only to realize that the light of existence in his eyes is due to the biological position's access. It's like on some level the purpose of life is just live the most updated human being, live through humanity's newest update. After you have lived, you will in some sense do certain, it's fascinating, but if you notice, guys, the archetype of the hero that even Carl Jung speaks about, and we see the entertainment industry is obsessed with heroes. And it's true, because the heroic archetype was a sacrificial shift in uh, like principal values. The hero had to forget his life to be able to live for the species. And what it is that it's just like how viruses enter the biological body, and the body's like white blood cells, go, go, go. Like a SWAT team, the white blood cell, the white blood cells go in. Similarly, in one subjective realm, there is also natural balancing factors. It's kind of like You can say for the religious man who is in the biggest emergency of his life, it's as if what is beyond his will, he has no one else left to call. You know, I I remember seeing this commercial, and let me see if I can find it. All right, guys, here I found the video. I'm gonna. So I posted the video, guys. This video, this commercial, when I saw it, it was kind of intense. I found myself kind of just staring at it at first as if it's just a piece of medium, but then it became um, I was actually like tears were coming down my face for a while after that, because I realized it's we are starting wars over ideology. But when there is turbulence and a danger to the physical existence, the person's mind is still trying to hold on to stable subjectivity. I realized that the weakness of one man is the weakness of the species. And when a human being kind of becomes aware of their ability, they actually have to become aware of the limits of their ability. So you can say, if you notice, like there's something cool that happens, I think it karmically happens in any field of a competitive domain, where there's a person who has been in the field and there's a new person that comes in. The new person becomes the person who's like the opponent to beat, and the last second before the opponent to beat, before the new archetype into the system kind of survives, it attains victory, it fails, and the old how can I say it? I'm just saying, somebody who's been in the sport compared to somebody new to the sport, the new person needs to fail. You see, it's like great beings learn from their failures as much as they learn from their successes. Because either way, it's just phenomena in the moment. You can always study your moment. The intention I had with the title was that upon acknowledging that life ends, one begins to care about how it began, and begins to also care of how it's beginning in every moment. I realized that I was looking for something in my youth that I later on realized was not something that was outside of me. I was looking for a sense of self outside, and I got led astray. And so it's so crucial that the human being realizes life is no longer just a playground. It becomes an ideological battlefield. It's not just people walking in the streets, it's also ideas. These ideas influence the behaviors of environments. Sometimes it becomes a situation where the person who's looking at knowledge, let's say you wanted to become the ultimate scholar, to become the ultimate scholar, the person is wondering about where everything that is known is going, in some sense. And the scholar has to push aside the personal dimension, or step out of their personal dimension, and from an impersonal dimension, repersonalize the unknown again. That repersonalization of the unknown, repersonification of the unknown, is very crucial, because if it's not personified, the intelligence will not trust it. There's a Zen koan that says, the Zen koan that says, "Who were you before your parents were born?" Do you see? We are attention in space, and as attention moves in space, it awakens to an embodiment, a body. So we are reaching a point in our civilization where it is not enough to just be materialists anymore. It is not enough to just bow to an idea and think life is enough. I understand the importance of honesty. I understand the importance of love. I understand the importance of sincerity. I understand the importance of clarity. I understand the importance of the fear that brings wisdom, the fear that brings clarity. But I also understand that life is a juggling game of various designs, and there will come a moment where every being will look and they will realize their eyes are freer than what they are seeing. And that moment is when the archetype, this Mr. Within is another way of saying, like, who is looking out through your eyes. That which is looking out through your eyes finds an inner peace where the outer world has no longer to be in pieces. In an instant, the known and the unknown bow to the witness. As much as you are the greatest participant in your life, you are also its greatest witness. As much as you are the actor, you are also the audience member. And the mind is space being an audience of what's in itself. And the species has to begin taking a new approach to psychology founded upon firm language. You see, when I looked at the educational system, do you know what I saw, guys? I saw it's a keeping the cities of old alive project. This world needs armies of explorers to march into the unknown. This world needs conscious pilots, people who realize the opportunity of free will to, in some sense, take all that it knows and slam it to smash the unknown. There's this character, my mind playfully has visualized thought movement in this way. There's this character, I remember, I don't know where the character was from, but it was a character who had this fictional character who was like this swordsman, this woman who was the swordsman, and this woman, in some sense, the swords would fly in the air. The swords, like, it's as if the swords were being moved by her mind, right? So it was as if she was this deadly warrior whose swords were just floating around her, you know? And you know how, like, I could just imagine a person, imagine you had a bunch of swords that you could control with your mind flowing around you. In an instant of chaos, those swords would instantly be pointed at the target. So what I mean by that is I have not only had the privilege in this life to be aware of thought, but I have also had the privilege of throwing thoughts at each other at different speed. When I say throwing thoughts at each other in different speeds, see, guys, there's certain activities that require the body. We call these external activities. There's certain bodies activities that are inner activities. These activities, they do require the existence of the body, but they do not require the active motion of the body. So a person can sit down and be still and close their eyes, and behind their eyes, suddenly, through trust of what is there can come fluidity of subjective repositioning. So I'll give you an example here. Like, let me see. I'm gonna try to attempt to pull a story out of the void here. Let's say we have um, Let's say a man finds a way to have a dialogue with the planet. The man asks the planet, "What can humans do for you?" The planet looks at humanity and says, "Follow my steps. Learn from the intelligence that brings the new." Creativity has no limits. Think about it. If you think you're limited, guess what? The mind has an ability to endlessly create limitations. Did you know? If you feel negative towards yourself, and it's okay for you, for example, there's certain times that my mind, of course, um, there comes a thought that is, I feel the thought is bringing down. It's close. See, thoughts, ideas, when they enter the mind, the sphere of the conscious mind, they either expand that fear or they limit it. That means, if I notice this, if a person gives a talk and that language replaces the language the other person has, but that person still doesn't become aware that they are still playing with language, then the Mr. Within talk has been a failure, guys. If I can't point out in these talks that everything you hear me say has to do with every experience you've been through in regards to how you see image behind the words, you can say speaking is like writing with sound in silence, on silence. Speech is sound written on silence, and that sound, like a movie, it can animate into a movie. But you won't believe it, but the human being has one advantage: we are multidimensional. And even though this multidimensionality is not to like the legends and the myths of ancient times where the gods would come down to earth, and people would go to the heavens, and so it's like, it's not like that. It's simply that we are realizing that there is so much change going on, that to linearize it all is impossible. Stories are just excuses for experience having to navigate further. We're temporary beings. we appear to be. And I find anytime a human being goes beyond the language threshold, they attain a sort of non-dual experience of the presence of the moment, regardless of the projections of the personality. We have to ask ourselves, what should we be looking at? And as we look at all phenomena, especially, guys, just take this in. The physical universe and this physical material plane of existence is endless. It's endless. Just take that in, guys. We are literally on the wings of a giant eagle flying in the sky, walking on. Imagine me and you are walking on the wings of a giant eagle, and this eagle is so huge that we can't see the edge of its wings. You see, as long as the body exists, there is a design that will wonder about purpose. At most, the mystical mindset or the Satchidananda state, if the person gets a glimpse of how they are a particle in a field of intelligence, how they're actually the field of intelligence. You're as a field of intelligence, you no longer do what you emotionally want, and you won't do what, in some sense, how can I say it? It's like conceptually want. You become a listener, and it's as if you gain the same eyes. You become part of all those beings in this evolutionary landscape that have reached it, that have moved beyond the language threshold. Evolution beyond the language threshold is really kind of strange. It's like, you see, it's the movement of free will. It's an oscillation. Check this out. I found a crazy pattern here, like a very unique pattern. When the person isn't born yet, how would I say it? It's like before they're born, life is not in their hands. It's the divine will. It's nature's will. As far as I'm concerned, this world evoked me. The same way language is evoked in the moment, I find the natural world evoked me into manifestation. So before our birth, not in our control. After our death, not in our control. During life, tiny percentage of some of it is in our control. So we have nothing to freak out as human beings, because before we were here, not in not in our will, and after we're gone, it's like it's not in our will. So you, at some point, you trust the rhythms of nature, and you just wonder how much in this manifest existence of yours you abided, you listen, you were yourself, instead of being a sort of. Let me tell you, life gets a different flavor, gets a different elegance when you are honest with yourself for a long time. And let me tell you why it gets a taste. Because everything becomes, it's as if life is not reacting to an artificial phenomena. Life is responding to a real phenomena. And there's a power in the real that the unreal can never hold. And what I mean by that is human manifestation is one of the most sacred positions. It was so sacred that Rama, in this deity from Indian mythology, in some sense, Rama, who was the archetype of the perfect divine man, he is asked why. Why should we work and suffer in this world? And his response is, oh, listen, ears of the world, ears of the world, that the lesser dimensions, the beings lesser than the human position, they are not even able to ask the question. And the beings in the higher dimensions, They are too busy with the answers. It is only humanity that can truly experience asking the question. And this is why in Vedic tradition, in the Mahabharata, we have gods coming down to consult these yogi, to get consultations from yogis. You know, imagine like the busiest like therapist in Hollywood. Okay, so imagine like imagine the gods would come down to these yogis who were just meditating in silence. And do you know how huge it is? Silence is not for every being. Silence is only for the traveler that has found the strength of his own exploration, of his own vision. Life becomes beautiful because your eyes are open, not because you need to see something beautiful. The mind can project the ugly, the mind can project the beautiful. The mind can do anything. Think of it this way: if your mind has an ability to have you see the worst things about yourself, do you think this mind that is so capable enough to create the chaos is not capable enough to create the order? It's all about navigation, it's all about an instrument being played. The musician is lost to the moment. The musician is the moment, is the sound. There is no separation from that rhythm of being with what the person does. It's like all the archetypes melt in an instant and it's a collective rhythm. So what it is as you live more, as you abide by your true nature, as Sri Ramana Maharshi would say, you end up beginning hearing cosmic symphonies, intuitive symphonies in the silence. You begin hearing the voice of a living planet, of a living universal sector. It's as if, how dare I say, I'm alive and the world isn't. The cosmos evokes us once. We are as if the universe is giving a speech and every sentence is every child being born. In a celestial performance, the microcosm attempts to fathom the macrocosm. You see, the human being, I find it there, this is how the person should truly see human existence. You are eyes open to the world. Eyes have opened to the world. Just forget who you are, forget who you want to be, forget what the world is, and for a second just see that in this moment you are eyes that are open. And this is the starting point. This solo, watchful kind of presence. This is the starting point. If a being cannot find contentment with the singular, their mind will get overwhelmed by the multidimensional. And you only get contentment from the singular by being content with the void. So what that means is Mr. Within realized there's so many axes, so many dualities in the realm of language. And I was like, how dare these axes not turn themselves? You know? And so in some sense I began kind of, how can I say, all these talks could be said to be uh kind of a playful war with language I've been having, with how language has been giving architecture to action. We are more than what we remember. Henry David Thoreau says it's not what you're looking at matters, it's what you see. And I'll tell you, I had this is a kind of unique thing. Sometimes I get often like this happens too much, more than normal, I think. But I'll tell you guys this. Sometimes when I'm like walking on, like, just attending to the tasks of the day, Sometimes my mind sees something, and that some design in the environment catalyzes it, as if some unique, mysterious, exciting factor of the day takes my attention, and that exciting factor makes me feel kind of like the attention. I don't know how to say it. Think of it this way: the mind projects. The mind generates parallel potentials. That means you can see something, but you can also see that thing you've seen in multiple ways, you know? So the mind has an ability to create parallel realities of where the attention is pointed to. Now, these parallel realities, we say these are like subjective potentials that have not been externalized or objectified yet. Imagination is where the potential of reality lives. So phenomena is multidimensional before an individual action is implemented. So before I choose to open a door, I can choose not to. So there's a potential, there's a subjective parallel kind of view of the moment. And in my implementation of one of those realities, the other realities go out of focus and a new dimension arises with new multidimensional parallels. The thought of life, its singular potential, dualistic potential, its void potential, its infinite potential. Reality is honestly this giant piece of clay that every person who enters the system sculpts it a little, and then they transition out of the system. I think we have to begin to make it easier for people's psychologies to begin treating civilization as a giant airport. And we are all pilots, and some people, we can say it's like this: the youth are the passengers, okay? The advanced communicators are the stewards and hostesses on the plane, and there are certain pilots to the plane. Human beings, believe it or not, just like an ape finding, like, let's say a caveman finding fire and freaking out, and that was like the first time human beings ever partied, where one person found fire and was like, oh, oh fire, oh. you know? And so that was like, I believe when the caveman found fire, that was also the first party ever, you know? Man found fire, he got fascinated for it. Now, man is finding a sort of unknown subjective space behind his eyes that must be now explored. It's as if like intelligence commands us to move further in the unknown, regardless of what bunker of knowledge the human being chooses to live in. I think it takes true. It's the true. It's like that. This is how you know you really are present in this world. When in some sense, language is also seen as the body is. It is seen as not you. In the Upanishads, there's this profound, in the Vedas there was this profound thing where it would say, it's like some guy would be like, "Is this the state of truth, man?" And the enlightened guy would be like, "Neti, neti, not this, not this." Endlessly negation of the story, negation of the story. Poor souls, they were really fighting language. For them, it was like Normandy of language, of the language wars. The language wars is really about trying to see that the human being doesn't have to be defined by the language that its environment builds the creature. Literally, like your parents spoon fed you baby food. Guess what? The environment in your society and your cultural program and where you were kind of born has spoon fed values to you. And so you have to become observant of what values you are wearing that you did not put on these clothing, and at the same time, what beliefs that are truly of your caliber, of your vision. So that means you acknowledge that there's an experiential point to life, and that experience is more profound than any sort of language given to it. This is why I say be playful with language, because it's a simulation, it's an empty room. It's animated in accordance to the experiencer. And the evolution of individual consciousness is an evolution into a collective experiencer of all objectivity and subjectivity. I believe it was in one of the Gitas, maybe Ribu Gita, where it was saying like the sage treats his body like himself as he would like another. And I wondered why, and I realized because the attribute list has nothing to do. Truth doesn't need to ask a question whether it's truth or not. Only the illusion does. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. An eternal glance of a temporal life is a moment where the freedom before any story told, the potential of life. It's as if life is potential energy, it's not kinetic energy yet, and that potential energy is divine as it is. You can only live for yourself when you realize yourself is truly the world's self. We are 8 billion human beings. There's a 4 billion year old civilization. We have evolved. Parts of our brains took millions of years for certain parts of our brain to evolve. But we have an evolved biological apparatus to a point that we can at least acknowledge the game of humanity. And it's a game that Mr. Within is asking everybody to participate in. Because you won't experience the fulfillment of your humanity unless you unlock its potentials in advanced collective ways. What does that mean? That means something unique is happening and the whole species is stepping out of the cocoon of language, you know? So it's nature. What I'm saying is, what I'm pointing out is how the winds, I have felt how the winds have passed me. What can we say? We are eyes open in space and time. What can we say? We are temporary, but evolution is our eternal effort to continue. What will man's influence lead? How will the whole cosmos remember mankind if it could? Will it remember it as the species who was too savage to see its own clarity? The issue is we will become a galactic civilization when we acknowledge the galactic audience. And what that means is it's when an archetype judges itself in accordance to its potential. It's when the future defines the past. That's a galactic civilization. A civilization that the past defines the future is still not advanced. The future is possibility. The past is past. The present remains as the only stage to perform. To find contentment with the observer of the moment, that means literally there's a component to your moment of being right now that is the conscious observer. Like you can choose to call it whatever you want, but it's like how you're alive not just in the body but in the space that this body projects. In other words, you are being your mind. Your ego is an iceberg in an ocean. And this iceberg thinks that this solid reality is the only thing that's there. But when the ego melts, the ocean's intelligence is it. So the archetype returns to the instant of divine attention that generated it. I remember this was years ago. I think I was talking to my brother about it. We were talking about divinity, like the experience of divinity. And I told him that I see the idea in the sense that there's something called divine attention. That means you can say, like an ant walking on a leaf, a caterpillar walking on a leaf, and a human being that sees a mantis, and that mantis, suddenly the human being pushes the mantis aside, to protect the caterpillar. And imagine in that second, in that instant, the caterpillar just has a glance and notices a hand moved, something moved past it, and danger went away. So it was like a sort of divine attention. This divine attention could be an implication of a collective being observing individual beings. That means human beings have had quite the imagination in many sci-fi writings to see future extraterrestrial civilizations. Many writers have attempted to animate that. But something that many people have not considered is that what if it's a space? What if it's a collective space? What if a chunk of space is a being? If existence has generated individual beings, I don't think it's too much of a far-fetched idea. It would create the opposite. We see there's light and day. We see there's chaos and order. There's good and bad. There's these dualities that govern morality. And the implication of an individual consciousness is a collective consciousness. Carl Jung, by just kind of explaining the psychology of man as the kind of the ego, the persona, the ego, the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. If you just look at the word collective unconscious, it's another way of saying there exists a collective conscious. That means there exists a collective conscious mind, but how man taps into it, how 8 billion species are going to evolve into it, maybe it's going to be digital, maybe it's not. Maybe before our heads get plugged into the same computer, human beings just touch a tree one last time to remember. I remember I was in Florida at the time. When I was in Florida, I was there for some weeks, and when I was there, I can't tell you, I was in such a sci-fi writer buzz. And I remember I wrote a story. I don't remember all the details of it, but it went something like this, where there's the story begins with this extraterrestrial child in a bubble in like this glass kind of like spaceship or something, you know. And this child who's in this glass spaceship, there's how can I tell you? Inside of it, there is a note, and the screen of the glass spaceship is like a screen. So long story short, the I remember calling the story "The Kind Soul." And the kind soul, he was this extraterrestrial being that eventually he realizes his species kind of got destroyed, and his parents sent him out through a bubble, and they kind of put a goodbye note, kind of similar to like, you know, like this guy would get along with Superman. But the idea was simply like the pushing of a character into an unknown space from the beginning. So this character is pushed into this unknown space, and eventually realizes, this extraterrestrial realizes, he has an uncle who is like an agent on Earth, an extraterrestrial agent on Earth. And so it's like in the bubble, there's that message. And so I remember kind of the child was from a civilization where they had in their mythologies really great beings. Like they had strange abilities, these extraterrestrial beings. Like one of them had an ability to just go in a battlefield and just, in some sense, raise his hand and suddenly make it into a fist as if he's holding on to the moment, and in that instant suddenly make an army, make all the intentions of war go away. So imagine like these beings had strange abilities, you know. There was one of them who could lift oceans into the sky, for example. I remember writing that. So anyways, this kid ends up going to Earth, and when he enters Earth, he lands and he's all grown up, you know. And as he enters Earth, he touches a tree, and when he touches the tree, he accesses all the memories of everything that has happened to the history of the planet and every being that has ever lived on it. So by just touching a tree, he becomes instantly all knowing of everything that exists in humanity. He becomes like instantly the truth of nature. And so this character goes on, and long story short, like, to be honest, I'll end the story off there. But the kid ends up realizing that the greatest power he has, like that power I told you of, like stopping a war, he understands. He does that at the end of it, like at the end of the story. Something strange happens that he like. Um, anyways, honestly, science fiction is incredible. It's like the butter to reality's boring bread. The mind can move, of course. And as it moves, it resculpts, re identifies, realigns. And it's as if every time the man moves, the alignment of the cosmos to himself changes. So, this is the whole deal that we find in the psychology of the modern generations, this kind of internal decision that has to be made, that should I live in fear or should I live in freedom? Now, many people, they assume freedom, but on some level, there is an idea that it's like you can tell when a being is free. They are free when they realize they are their own paradise builder. That's the freedom. The heavenly bliss of man, the idea that conscious existence is bliss, the state of Satchit Ananda, that consciousness to existence is the divine's expression. So, man in his existence is being a part of all existence, in other words. Something unique that may be known is that our minds can abstracticize at abstracticize at different speeds. Playfully, I remember, like, this was years ago. I kind of attended this psychic expo, and I remember walking in between those booths and for a second closing my eyes and instantly seeing like a snapshot, like an image, that the whole room was kind of in another dimension being surveillanced by an extraterrestrial kind of company, you know? So what I mean by that is the mind has potentials to animate. We have to kind of realize it's like an arrow and a bow, right? So in whatever comes tension, it can access the intensity of your personal dimension. Whatever is not in the attention, your conscious attention, you can't bring forth the intensity of the personal, right? So it's like when a person has to talk about a changing world, they have to be able to watch various moments of this world change. Our free will is not known. It's mysterious. Our consciousness is mysterious AF. you know? I find we inhabit language. We live in structures of thought. So we don't feel truly alone in a cosmos that could be empty. But the thing is that the emptiness is like the empty blank page, and human existence is like a certain pen, okay, with a certain kind of ink. And so this, with a certain kind of lineage, certain kind of design, a color. And so, in some sense, we are, what do you call it? Every moment of every human action is like an expression in emptiness. So this emptiness, there's two choices. Either we see empty as empty, or we see empty as potentially the edge of everything full. Honestly, it's I have this playful kind of view that language is being projected from the third eye like half a meter in front of the person's head. And what the person is actually in is a sort of spherical, you can say more closer to electromagnetic kind of field. What that means is eventually in the elemental dimension, as one honor it this way, it's like you have to befriend the world before you can truly work with it. To befriend the world means to first not only just instantly find an honest world to live in, But it means after that kind of simple state, being willing to kind of work with the complex. So for me, the educational system, all that it could be is an oscillation, a vibration between simple views, complex views, simple views, complex views, simple views, complex views. Complex views arise from simple, you know. Simple views can all become complex. So eventually, what we're doing is we are creating a sort of new subjective landscape of an opportunity. So I noticed something interesting. It's like we have to take a kind of gladiator, like ancient Greek general kind of approach to this, to the educational system. So, if we were to instantly command the refinement of a system, we would have to see the inefficiency of the system first. And the inefficiency of the system is that there's 8 billion people with different DNAs and different eyes, but they all have to, in some sense, have only one gate to enter. So the thing is that the educational system, rather than being based on the 1900s, where the soldiers had to kind of run from one bunker to another and make sure they had memorized the information exactly so they could repeat it instantly, it's like rather than that sort of test, it becomes more of a resource. All the governing institutions in the future are going to become resource outlets, because we're going to realize the experience of the journey or literally is more important. We got to treat these 8 billion people. They have to realize they're all tourists and manifestation. So what it is the to enhance the quality of human experience is uh, possible. Anyways, guys, I hope this talk was helpful. Pretty much a new approach to human behavior, starting from a freedom from how language defines our world. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Much blessings and namaste.